Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our monthly CCNA Kickoff show. I'm Keith Bogart, and I'll be your presenter for today. Just like to do a quick sound and video check here. I just want to make sure that everything's coming through. Let's see here. Looks like it. I got video. I don't hear myself, but I assume you guys can hear me. Let me know if for some reason the audio is not coming through, because I'm not getting it on my laptop, but there we go. Now I'm getting it. Okay, great. Let's dive right into this, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the course is going to cover, what it's not going to cover, set your expectations, and then just jump right on in. So like I mentioned, my name is Keith Bogart. I am one of the instructors here at INE, and here you have my contact information. I'll go ahead and expand that a little bit for you. So if for some reason you have some questions during the show today that were not answered, feel free to reach out to me right there, and reach out to me either email or Twitter or LinkedIn, and you can send your questions to me that way. Now, one thing I would prefer though, and I want to show you this to you as well, and I say this in all my live classes, is that if you have a question, it's a good idea to let other people benefit from your question and benefit from the answer as well. And if you just send it to me personally, other people aren't going to see that, and so they're not going to be able to get answers to their questions. So in case you're not familiar with this, let me show you a tool. It's called the INE Online Community. I'll bring it up right here. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it. So if you're not already an INE member, you can just go to, I believe it's members.ine.com. And if you're not a member, you can create a free account right here. Don't have an account? Create an account. It's free, doesn't ask anything for you. And then once you've created an account, I'll go ahead and log into this myself. All right, so once you have an account, then at that point, if you look up here in the Connect section, so if you click on that little Connect button, you will see, and I'll zoom in on this here a little bit, you'll see IEOC, which is the INE Online Community. It's basically a bunch of forums that we have for various certifications and things like that. So because today is a CCNA kickoff, if you have a question that was not answered today, I would just go down here under Cisco CCNA, and then I'd look at the second one down, just the general CCNA, click on that. And then first of all, you can just look through here and see if somebody else has already submitted the same question that you have. And if they haven't, and of course you can do a search, if they haven't, post your question. And we have a lot of people that monitor this, a lot of people that look at this. So it's almost a guarantee that within 24 hours, someone will get back to you with an answer to the question that you post right here. And that way it benefits you and it benefits other people in the future. Now, in the unlikely event that you post a question here and after a couple of days or 3 days you get no response, then by all means, feel free to reach out to me here via my email or LinkedIn or Twitter or something, and I'd be happy to answer your question. I would just prefer that you go through the INE Online Community first. So let's talk about our course today and what I'm going to be covering. So the main emphasis of today's course is really geared towards someone who is thinking about pursuing their CCNA. Okay, someone who's thinking maybe they want a career change and work as a network administrator, or maybe they already work in some sort of technical capacity and they'd like to get more into computer networks. And through your own research or through word of mouth or something, you've heard that the CCNA certification is a really good starting tool or starting certification to have to get you on that road to getting that employment or that job that you want. But you're not sure what that entails. You're not sure what you're getting yourself into. What do you have to learn for the CCNA? When you go take the test, what's that experience going to be like? What are some tips for making your studying as effective as possible? So those are the types of things, and you can see right here, those are things I'm going to be talking about today. So today is not a technical presentation about, let's talk about this technical topic and how it works and how to troubleshoot that. That's not what this is geared towards. This is for people who are are thinking about getting their CCNA and to just give you some more information about what that process is going to look like. And if you do decide to go down that road, just some ideas to make it as efficient and workable as possible for you. So that's the main emphasis. Now, there's a lot of people on YouTube Live right now who are watching. So if you have technical questions about, how does spanning tree work, or how does an OSPF authentication work, or something like that, feel free to type it into the question feed there on YouTube Live, and I'm sure one of the many people watching will give you an answer. But because there are a lot of people watching, when I get around to my Q&A sections, I'm specifically going to be scanning through, looking for questions from people like I've described, people who are watching this with the intent of, I want to learn just more about what the CCNA certification is. I want to know what I'm getting my feet into. I want to know what challenges I can expect to face. So I'm going to be more looking for questions like that, because if I answer every single technical question that goes along the way, we'll be here all day, and it won't really help those very, very beginning people to understand anything more about the process. So with that in mind, I've broken today up into several, like 5 or 6 sections. Each section is somewhere going to be between like anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes in length at the most. And then I'll have a Q&A session right after each section, and then we'll go into the next section. So, so that's going to be the process here. So feel free to type your question at any time, and that's what we're going to go through. So I'm going to start by talking about the testing experience, okay? So let's look at it from the perspective of, what exactly are the tests? Is there more than one test to get a CCNA? How do I register or sign up for these tests? How much do they cost? So some sort of practical or logistical things like that. All right, so let's assume that you've already decided that, you've done your research. You know that the CCNA is a very well-known certification. You know that hopefully you're going to get paid more if you get into the networking field than what you're getting paid right now, or for whatever reason, you've decided, yes, I want to get my CCNA. All right. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to take 1 test or 2 tests? Now, first, that might seem like a no-brainer to someone. Like, well, why would I ever take 2 if I have an option of 1? Well, here's why. So to get your CCNA certification, it's basically 2 separate exams, which is the ICND-1 and the ICND-2, or you can take what's called the composite exam. Now let me show you where those are on Cisco's website. So if you want to follow along with me here, just go into Google, and then from Google we're going to just search on Cisco CCNA. Cisco CCNA. And this very first hit for me is good enough. CCNA routing and switching. Okay, so you can see here that for the CCNA, this is Cisco's sort of like level 1 certification. So it says no prerequisites are required for the CCNA. Sometimes people ask me, hey, do I need to get like a CompTIA, networking plus certification or something like that beforehand? Nope. No prerequisites means no prerequisites. Now, of course, there is an assumption here that you know the basics of computers, which you clearly do if you're watching me. You know what a computer is, you know how to turn it on, you know what a web browser is, you know what the internet is. I mean, clearly you know all that stuff because you're watching this right now. So that's really the only prerequisites necessary to pursue your CCNA. So what after that? Okay, so here you can see the CCNA is composed of the ICND-1, which is technically the 100-105 exam. And you can see ICND stands for Interconnecting Cisco Networking Devices. And then there's the ICND-2 exam. So if you take both of those and you pass both of those, you now are CCNA certified. And Cisco will actually mail you a really nice sort of paper certificate claiming that you're CCNA certified, and they'll mail you a cashier's check for $5 million payable. Well, actually, they won't do that. Or your other option is to take what I call the composite exam. They call it the accelerated exam, which is the 200-125 exam. Now, how would you decide between these? Here's what I generally tell people. If you've already been working in some capacity in networking, okay, so you've already got like a minimum of oh gosh, let's say a minimum of 6 months of some sort of networking experience behind you. You've been racking and stacking equipment, screwing it into racks. You've been cabling stuff. Maybe you've been configuring some real basic like IP addresses and things on stuff. But basically you've got 6 to 9 months of networking already under your belt. If that describes you, then yes, you could probably go directly with the 200-125 accelerated exam. Most people, that doesn't describe them. Most people know little or nothing about networking, and I would not recommend the accelerated exam for that type of person. For that type of person, which is most of you watching probably, I would definitely recommend that you start with the 100-105 exam, the ICND-1, and then when you've passed that, go on to the 200-105 ICND-2 exam. The accelerated exam, what I call the composite exam, the 200-125, is actually a mixture of questions from ICND-1 and ICND-2. So it basically takes those two pools of questions and conglomerates them into one aggregated test. So you're going to get questions from both those exams in some sort of like random order in the accelerated one. Also, sometimes people say, well, how long should I expect to have to prepare or study before I'm ready to take these exams? All right, that's a very subjective question. It really depends on how much time you can put into it and how good your memorization is, right? If you're one of those people who's very fortunate that you can read a chapter in a book and pretty much memorize the whole thing, then go get it tested on it, it's going to be a lot quicker for you. But for the average person, let me sort of paint a picture for you here. If you are able to dedicate a minimum of 2 hours a day during the work week, okay, every single day, Monday through Friday, 2 hours a day, somewhere during the day, and then on the weekends, a minimum of 4 hours a day on Saturday and another 4 hours a day on Sunday. So if you're able to do that consistently, week after week after week, I would say you should be ready to take your ICND-1 exam somewhere around 3 to maybe 4 months into that process, okay? And then once you've got that, then probably another 4, maybe 5 months for ICND-2, because ICND-2, the topics are a little bit harder, a little bit more complex, so I'm sort of buffering in an extra month there. So definitely in less than a year, if you're able to study it with that consistency and that quantity, you should be able to bang out both of these exams. Some people can do it faster. Some people, because they don't have that kind of dedicated schedule, because they're not disciplined to hold to it, take longer than that. But roughly 3 to 4 months per exam seems to be an average. Okay, so let's say that you've decided, okay, I'm going to follow Keith's advice and I'm going to take the ICND-1 exam. Well, let's figure out now, let's go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to talk about, let's say that you are now 4 months into the future. All right, so it's now 4 months, you've been doing your studying and you are ready to take this exam. How do you take it? Where do you go? How do you pay for it? How do you register for it? So let me show you how to do that as well. So you just click right here. And then Cisco uses a vendor called Pearson VUE. They are a testing center. They have centers all over the world, hundreds if not thousands of testing centers all over the world. So you basically have to register with them, and it's free to register with them. And then, so right here, you can see, if you want to register for the exam, it says register, Pearson VUE. So I'm just going to click on that. Okay, so from here, we would want to sign in. So this is clearly after you've already created an account with Pearson VUE. And oh, great. I don't know if I remember my credentials. Let's see here if I can remember what that was. That's going to be tricky. Oh, that wasn't it. All right, let's just try one other thing and then I'll give up. That's not it either. Okay, let me hold on just a second here. I'm doing this in Internet Explorer, which hasn't clearly cached my Pearson VUE credentials, but I believe if I do this in Chrome, Chrome will have it already cached. I don't have to worry about remembering what that was. And the reason I want to show this to you is because I want you to see the process of registering, where the testing centers are, how much it costs, registering for a time slot, and all that good stuff. All right, so hopefully it'll be in here. Pearson VUE, sign in. All right, please have my credentials. Yes, all right, good, it's there. All right, here you go. So we're now in the Pearson VUE website. We've already logged in. The first thing is you're going to click on proctored exams. In case you're not familiar with that term, a proctored exam simply means you actually have to go to a Pearson VUE testing center. You have to drive there, take the train, whatever, and then you sit inside of a secure room with video cameras and you take the test on one of their computers. And then when you're done, you get your results, and the results are immediately sent back to Cisco as well. So that's what we mean by a proctored exam. So that's what we want. And so I'm looking for the ICND1, which is the 100-105. So there it is, part 1. Go. I'm going to do English. And by the way, I did find out, and I'll talk a little bit later about how much time you're given for the exam. I believe it's 90 minutes. We'll get to that in just a second, just so I can verify that. But I did find out a little while ago that if you are taking this exam in a country where English is not the native language, like somebody said they signed up for this and I think it was Portugal or something like that. They said that in those countries, you're actually given an additional 30 minutes to take the exam, because you can clearly see this is not offered in Portuguese. It's not offered in French, right? It's not offered in Chinese. So pretty much have to be able to read English and understand the questions. And so they buffer in an additional 30 minutes in a lot of other countries, recognizing that people might take a little bit longer reading the questions because English is not their native language. So just be aware of that if you're taking it outside the US. Okay, so here you can see the price of the exam is $165. Now, this will answer another question I sometimes get. Sometimes people say, well, wouldn't it be financially to my advantage to take the CCNA accelerated exam, just the one, as opposed to taking these two separate exams and having to pay twice? Actually, no, it's not. So ICND1 and ICND2 are both $165, right? So if you multiply that, what does that give you? That gives you $330, if I'm doing my math right for the two of them, $330. If you take the accelerated exam, I think you're saving like $5. That accelerated exam is $325 or something like that. So finances should not be a motivation to go for the accelerated versus the two separate exams. You're not going to be saving any money. All right, so now we go to schedule this exam. Here I click yes, I accept. This basically says, look, I promise not to tell other people what I saw on the exam, tell other people what topics there were or what questions I got. So I'm agreeing to Cisco's non-disclosure agreement. All right, and then here you put in your address. Like for example, I'm at the INE office right now, which is on Meridian Parkway in Durham. I do a search, and it'll show you all the testing centers near you. Now, I'm real fortunate because here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area, there's lots of testing centers. You, depending on where you live, you may have to drive a little bit to get to a testing center, but hopefully it won't be too far away. I'm just going to click this top one here, Carolina Career College. Next. And I'll get to select my date and my time slot. So we can see I could actually take it as early as tomorrow, the 8th. So I'll click on March 8th. And not a lot of time slots available for tomorrow, only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What if I take it next Monday, the 12th? All right, so there's a lot more available time slots for that. So let's say I want to take next Monday at 1 o'clock. And this is as far as I'm going to be able to go, because after this point, I'd have to put in my credit card and order this, and I don't want to do it. But that's it. One other thing to know about this is that once you order the exam, once you've registered for it and you've selected a time slot, you can't get your money back. If you get sick, or you get a flat tire, or you just chicken out or whatever, your money's gone. You've just given it to Cisco. So do everything in your power to make that time that you've registered for, because no refunds, no change fees. So just be aware of that. All right, so that is how you register for the exam and then go and take it. So with that, now let's talk about the testing experience. What's it going to be like when you step into this Pearson VUE testing center? What are you going to see? What are you going to experience? What's going to happen to you? So let's talk a little bit about that. So number one, what should I expect when I walk into the testing center? All right, so you're going to walk in there. You're going to have to sign in. Clearly tell them what test you're there to take, although they should have it on their records because you've already registered for it. And then you're going to have to basically give them everything you have that can be taken off, like your watch. You're going to have to give them your wallet. You're going to have to give them your smartphone. If you walked in with a tablet, you're going to have to give them that. Anything that could potentially be used for cheating, you have to hand over to them. And then they're going to either lock it into a secure drawer in their desk, or I've been in some testing centers where they actually have a row of lockers, and you lock it into a locker, and then you get to take the key with you. But key point, no calculators. As you start going through the CCNA and realizing that some things require calculations, like understanding binary and hexadecimal and stuff, don't let anybody say, oh, don't even worry about that. You can use a calculator when you take the exam. No, you can't. No calculators are allowed. Oh, well, don't worry about that because the computer they sit you in front of, that has a calculator that you can use. No, it doesn't. So you'll have to learn how to do all this stuff in your head because there's no calculators anywhere that you can take in with you or that are on the existing PC you're going to be sitting in front of that you can use. So you're going to give them all that stuff, and then they're going to give you a couple of things. They're going to give you like an 8.5 by 11 laminated sheet of paper, and they're going to give you 1 or 2 dry erase markers. So that's where you can write notes to yourself, or you can do like little memory aids and stuff like that. They're going to give you a dry eraser, so you can erase that. And they should also give you a pair of earplugs. So when you sit down, you hear other people crying and weeping next to you, you can sort of tune that out by putting earplugs into your ears. So that's what you'll get. So then they will gently walk you into the room that has a whole bunch of PCs in there. They'll sit you down in front of a cube and they'll log you in. All right, they'll type in your name, they'll get the test ready to go, and then they'll walk away. The door will shut and you will start to sweat. Now here's what's going to happen next. On the computer, the first thing you're going to have an option to do is to go through a tutorial of what the test questions look like. And that's what I'm going to talk about here in just 1 second. That's my next topic. That's optional. You know, if you've already, for example, if you're watching this right now, you'll be able to skip that because I'm going to show you right here the exact same thing you're going to see right there. Then the test itself doesn't start. Remember, this is a timed test. You're only given a certain amount of time, which, like I said, I believe is 90 minutes. We'll double check that. But that timer does not start until you press the start button. So usually what I recommend to people is, you know, let's say your time slot was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So you sit down, it's like, you know, by the time you give them your wallet and everything, they sit you down, it's like 1:05, 1:07. I usually tell people, hey, use that laminated piece of paper you've got there in front of you, and before you start that timer, do like a quick brain dump of some of those things you've been memorizing, like the OSI model and what their names are. Write that down there. Some things you've used to help you memorize subnet masks and subnetting. Write that down there. So by the time you click that start button, you should have a nice little memory aid that you've created for yourself on that dry erase piece of paper. Now, clearly you probably don't want to spend 20 or 30 minutes doing that. I'm sure they would probably come in and say, what's going on? We see you haven't started your test yet. But it's okay to spend a few minutes doing that and getting ready and then pressing the button, and then there you go. Then the test begins. Now, as the questions go along, clearly you have to hit a certain threshold, a certain minimum point level in order to pass the exam. And I'll talk about what that point level is in just a second. But as you're on a question, once you hit submit or next and go on to the next question, there is no moving backwards. Okay, so make sure you spend time really thoroughly reading a question and doing your best to answer it, because there have been plenty of times when someone will get to a question, let's say question number 6. They'll say, Oh man, I remember reading something about this, but I just can't answer this. I don't remember it. I gotta guess. Okay, I'll answer B, and they move on. And then all of a sudden, question number 15 rolls around, and something about question number 15 triggers their memory about question number 6. Oh, that's right. Too late. You've already gone beyond it. Can't go backwards. Okay? Another thing to be aware of. Some of these questions are not written very well. In other words, the phrasing of the question, the question might say, blah, 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 select the best answer. And then you see a bunch of answers. You say, well, wait a second. The way this question was written, technically answer A and answer C could both be correct, but they only want me to select one. That's clearly a bad question, right? It has been written sort of vague and ambiguous. You're going to come across that. It's unfortunate. You may be tempted because within each question you have an option of typing in a comment, right? Some people say, oh, this question stinks. I'm going to type in a comment. Why did you type this? This could be A or C. I don't understand this. You're wasting time because guess what? That clock is not stopping just because you're typing in your comment. So while you might be tempted to do that, I would advise against it because you need every single second you can get on that clock as it's going down. All right, so let's take a look at what is the format of the test questions. What are they going to look like? This is clearly a computer-based exam, so what types of questions are you going to get? Well, for that, we can go back to this site right here. And now here we can click on where it says review the type of exam questions, all right, under exam tutorial. So you can click on that. Oh, wow, they've changed this a little bit. So now they've got a bunch of videos, and I looked at this just yesterday, and it didn't look like this. Interesting. Well, let's see here. What's this one look like? Okay, multiple choice. I guess there's somebody talking in the background. Wow, 3 minutes just to describe a multiple choice question? That is insane. Drag and drop, okay. So basically what they've done here is they've taken, let me show you something. Like I said, I looked at this just yesterday and this is what I saw. They used to have, and maybe it's just because I'm looking at this in Chrome or something, but they used to have something that was, let's see here, let me pause this and let me minimize this. Let me put over here. Okay. So basically it looks like what you're seeing in the video is what they used to have as of yesterday, this type of thing. So review exam questions. Now I'm doing this on the composite exam, so maybe the composite exam still uses this old one here. So you would go there, you would click on play, you would right click on that, okay? And so some of the questions are multiple choice single answer, like that, very simple. Other questions are multiple choice, multiple answer. And the nice thing about these ones is it will actually tell you how many answers are correct. It'll say choose 3, choose 2, so you won't be left guessing how many answers I need to select. Now I'll stop and pause right here, and I will tell you that probably 85% of all the questions you're going to see will be one of these two, multiple choice single answer or multiple choice multiple answer. Okay, so the next ones I'm going to show you after this make up that smaller remaining percentage of questions that you're going to see. All right, drag and drop. You'll probably get anywhere between 1 and 3 questions like this. For example, they love testing you on the OSI model, doing something like this, showing you what the layers are, showing them out of order, and having you put them into the correct order using a drag and drop type of thing. So you won't see too many of those. Fill in the blank. I don't know that I've ever seen a fill in the blank question on any of the CCNA exams. Clearly the testing engine is capable of it, but I've never seen that. Now the router simulation. Up at the top here, what they're scrolling through right now is like a scenario saying, hey, this has happened in this network. Here's what you need to do. We need you to fix it. We need you to configure this. And then what they're scrolling through right there are the instructions of how to access the things. And so you will click on a PC, a virtual PC there, and now you get into a router. And here's where they're testing you on your knowledge of Cisco iOS commands. Do you know how to type in the correct command in the correct place to accomplish a particular objective? So the router simulations are typically testing you on, do you know how to create something, how to configure a feature or protocol, to turn something on, to make something do something, and do you know the commands to do that? So the router simulations, that's primarily what they're testing you on. People really hate these because these can take a lot of your time. If you're not careful, you could burn 7 or 8 minutes doing a single router simulation if you don't know what you're doing. So be very careful that you don't do that. I would spend no more than 5 minutes, absolute maximum, on a router simulation. Now if we keep on going here. Just some other questions that people sometimes have about router simulations. If you're familiar with Cisco iOS, or if you've sort of dabbled with Cisco iOS, which is a command line, you type in commands in your keyboard to get stuff to happen. So it's not a GUI, it's not a drag and drop or a press this button or select this menu item. It's all based on commands that you have to memorize. Well, as you start getting familiar with it, you realize that there are several shortcuts in Cisco iOS. For example, you might type in just a few letters of a command and hit the tab key, and it fills in the rest of the command for you. Or you might hit the question mark, and it'll show you a list of available commands and things like that. So a common question I get is, well, on these router simulations, this isn't real Cisco software. This isn't real iOS in a router. This is a simulation. So does it support all those shortcuts and things like I would get in regular iOS? Usually on the left, like for example right here, if you can see this. So this section right here will tell you if it does. This section will tell you, for example, right here it says the help command in the simulation is more limited than it is on an actual router. So it gives you a little bit of idea there, and my experience is that the tab command does work in the simulations. But I would recommend that you memorize the full commands and type in the full commands rather than relying on shortcuts. All right, another type of question you're going to get is the testlet situation. So up there at the top, once again, they're describing a scenario to you, and then you have 4 multiple choice questions you have to answer within this one testlet. So these are like 4 questions built into one. So when you read, for example, that the ICND 1 exam has, let's say, 55 questions, this counts as 1 of those questions. All right, so we gotta wait till we finish this testlet here. All right, and then let's just move forward. The next one is the simlet. So in the simlet, it's also multiple choice questions, but here it's sort of like a combination of a router simulation and multiple choice, because in order to answer the multiple choice question, you have to log into a virtual router, a simulated router, or switch, look around, and then answer the question. So what makes this different than a router simulation is that these simlets are really testing your knowledge of troubleshooting and verification commands. In other words, do you know how to issue the correct iOS command that begins with the word show to pull up the information you're looking for? So you're not really configuring anything in a simlet. You're not changing the characteristics or behavior of something. You're just issuing a bunch of commands to try to get information out of the device so you can answer the multiple choice questions. And I believe that is the last kind they have here. Yep, that's it. Okay, so those are the various types of questions you will see. Like I said, 85% of them are just going to be multiple choice, with that remaining 10 or 15% being the testlets, the simlets, drag and drop, that kind of thing. And the last thing I want to answer in this section, and then we'll go into a Q&A, is how well did I do? So once you hit end, so when you're done with the exam and you hit the end or submit button for the very last question, you will instantly know how well you did. It'll tell you what your total score was. It'll say, congratulations, or I'm sorry, but you're a complete idiot. Or, I don't know what it'll say in case you fail, but it will tell you what the passing percentage was and if you passed the exam or not. What you will also get is when you walk out of the room with all the computers in it and you go back to, collect your keys and your wallet and everything, the person there, the testing administrator, will print out of a printer a piece of paper that will tell you how well you did. And in addition just to your overall score, if I go ahead here a little bit, let's see here, where is it? Right here. Okay, so we're going to talk about this in the next section here, but when you are on any of these exams, here under description where it says review the exam topics, you can click on that. Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next section, but it gives you a high-level overview of the topics to be covered. Now, I'm not going to click on show details just yet, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because once you're done taking the exam, it'll tell you how well you did in each category. It'll say you got 95% correct in network fundamentals. You got 16% correct in LAN switching fundamentals. So you'll have a good idea of which major categories you did really well and which major categories require further studying on your part. Now, it's not going to tell you, here's the question you got wrong and here was the correct answer. You're not going to get that level of detail. Now, that also leads me to another thing I want to mention. So statistics say that somewhere between like 70 to 75% of all the people that take either the ICND-1 or the ICND-2 for the first time fail it. Vast majority of people have to take it 2, sometimes 3 times before they pass their exam. So chances are pretty good you're not going to pass it your first time around, which kind of stinks because you're paying $165 every time. They don't give you a discount just because you're taking it the second, the third, and the fourth time. It's always $165 US dollars. So this is what I usually recommend to people. If I'm sitting down and I'm taking one of these computer-based exams like this or the CCIE or the CCNP or whatever, one thing I do is when I get to a question that I'm uncertain about, I know I'm going to have to guess. Okay, I just don't know the answer to this one. I'll make my guess, but before I leave that question, on that laminated sheet of paper that they gave me, I'll write just like 3 or 4 words about that question, like frame relay LMI extensions. Okay, I got a question on frame relay LMI extensions. I had no idea what that was, so I'll write that down, and I'll move on to the next one. So by the time I'm done taking the exam, I've written down like little keywords or like little bulleted items about the questions that I struggled with. Now, why do I do that? Well, once I hit end, let's say I'm done with the exam and I still have, 5 or 6 minutes on the clock or more. I won't hit submit just yet. I'll look at that thing and I'll try to memorize what I just wrote. Okay, frame relay LMI extensions, OSPF authentication. Okay, there was that one. There was one on there about BGP peering. So I'll try to go and sort of burn that into my brain and then submit for grading. And then I fail, let's say. So now I go and I collect my keys. I'm still going over in my mind those things I wrote down. Now when I go back to my car, before I put the key in the ignition, I will whip out something that's capable of recording my voice, like my tablet or my smartphone, and I'll press the recorder on here. And I'll just sit back and I'll say, okay, there was a question on the exam about frame relay that I totally got wrong. I had to guess it. There was a question on the exam about OSPF authentication. I didn't know what that was. They were asking me what the TCP port number was for BGP. I think I had to guess on that one too. And I'll go through that, trying to remember, because your mind is at its most fresh. You're going to remember those things the moment you walk out of that testing center. They will come to your mind the easiest. Then eventually, after a few minutes, you'll say, okay, that's about it. I can't remember any of the other questions I got wrong. Stop the recording. Now, drive away. Now drive to your home, your office, wherever you're going. Because I'll tell you what, if you wait to do that type of thing until you get back to your office, you get back to your home, a lot of those questions you got wrong will just fade away. You'll just have forgotten about them. You want to remember as many of those as possible. And why? Because now when you get back to your office, back to your workplace, you can play the recording back to yourself, type it up in like Notepad or something, and now you've got a little study guide for yourself. Topics that you know you need to work harder on and study because you got them wrong. But you definitely want to make that verbal audio recording in your car or on the park bench or whatever, right there outside the testing center the moment you walk out while everything is still fresh in your mind. All right, so with that concludes this section right here. So now let me go ahead and go into see if you guys have any questions that I can answer. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, so so networking wrote, many people are using exam dumps to pass the exam. Should I also take an exam dump? Well, here's my personal feelings on that. First of all, for those of you who are not familiar with that term exam dump, what that really is that's somebody who's basically cheated. That's somebody who went and took the exam and took photographs of it while they did something to record the questions, and then they went and they created this thing called an exam dump, which is actually the questions they saw and the answers that they were exposed to, and it's cheating. It's basically studying the questions in advance. So, let's just take the moral and ethical thing out of it for just a second, okay? Let's say you had no problem with cheating. That didn't concern you. Okay, let's just ignore that for a second. If you're pursuing your CCNA, I'm assuming you're doing it because you want a better job or you want a promotion at your job. Basically, you want to get some sort of a job where you're doing CCNA type tasks. Well, if you go in there and you pass the exam simply because you memorize the questions in advance through a brain dump, how's that going to help you when it comes time for an interview? I can almost guarantee you they will ask you technical questions at the interview. How are you going to answer those if you don't know the technology, if you didn't study it? In some interviews, I've been told, they actually whip out some routers and they say, all right, configure OSPF on these. Let me see you do it. You're not going to be able to do that if you've just been memorizing the brain dumps. Let's say you manage to sweet talk them and you get through the interview. Hey, yeah, let's meet for a beer later on. Here's the job for you, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Okay, so now you get the job. What's going to happen? First couple days on the job, it's going to be very clear to people that you're an idiot because you can't do anything. You say you're a CCNA? Really? And yet you don't know how to configure an IP address on this router's interface? So you're just setting yourself up for failure, in my opinion, if you're using a brain dump, because even though you might be able to get the certification, you haven't really learned what the certification says you've learned, and you won't be able to put that into practice. So I just don't think you're doing yourself any favors by using brain dumps. All right, so what else do we have here? So networking, I see you have a question there about spanning tree. I'm going to hold off. I'm just going to scroll through the rest of them here, and if I don't have anything else, I'll get back to that real quickly. So Salim, you have your ICND 2 next week. Awesome. I'm sure you'll pass. Please let us know. Any topic suggestions for simulators, simulations, and configurations? I'll get to that. So in, I think, my next section or the section after that, I'm going to talk about things like GNS3, Packet Tracer, the pros and cons of them. So I will get into that. Should I study Red Hat, RHCSA after the CCNA? That's your own personal preference. It all depends on what job role you're seeking. Nobody can answer that but you. It's really up to you. Do you know of any free resources to practice subnetting? Cisco used to have, it's been a long time since I searched for this, but they used to have something called a subnetting game. that was free. Let me see if they still have that. Cisco subnetting game. Games Arcade. Maybe it's still in here. All right, yeah, so they've got the subnet troubleshooting game, so you can do that. That's free to do that. I'm sure there's other stuff online as well that you can look for. That's just something that came to my top of my head there. Oh, I didn't share that screen. Sorry about that. So I went to Google and I typed in Cisco subnetting game, and then it came up with Games Arcade. And then here you can see they've got the subnet troubleshooting game. So that's something you can try out. All right, so those are the only questions there so far. So somebody had a question about this scenario. So this is, I said I wouldn't get into technical questions, but there weren't a lot of questions this go around, so let's go ahead and hit this real quick. Somebody said, hey, if I have a switch with some ports, let's say 0/1, this is 0/3. They said, hey, what if I take a cable from 0/1 and loop it back and plug it into my switch? Excuse me. Well, first of all, there's not a lot of reason to do that, but if you're just trying to understand how spanning tree would work, so in this particular case, the switch is running spanning tree. It will send out a BPDU on this interface, and in that BPDU it will say my sending port ID is something like 0/1, so that'll arrive in right here. And then this port will also send out a BPDU, and he'll say that his sending port ID is 0/3, and in spanning tree, lower is better. The lower number is always better. So in this particular case, because 0/1 is lower than 0/3, spanning tree will say, okay, I'm going to put this port right here into the forwarding state, and the higher port number I'm going to block. So that's how spanning tree would deal with that scenario. All right, any other questions for me? Okay, then let's keep going. In this next section, I'm going to sort of talk about the topics that you're going to be tested on. For example, we're going to answer the questions of, how do I discover what topics I need to learn? How do I discover for a given topic how much depth I need to learn? I don't really want to study a topic all the way to the CCIE level if I'm only going for my CCNA right now. How do I know when to stop in my research? How do I know if I'm going to see a particular topic on the exam or not? So let's talk about some various ways that you can get answers to those questions. So the first place you should go is to look at the CCNA blueprints. What is that? Well, for that, we go back to Cisco's page. Okay. And once again, right here under description, we want to click on Review the Exam Topics. This takes you to what's called the blueprint. And all Cisco exams from the CCNA all the way up to the CCIE have these blueprints. And you can download it in a PDF format. But for example, here you see the high-level ones. This is the ICND 1. And if I click on, let's take LAN switching fundamentals. So these percentages here, this tells you of all the questions you're going to see in the exam. And by the way, you can see right here, it says the ICND 1 is 90 minutes, 45 to 55 questions. Okay, so of the 45 to 55 questions you're going to see, this tells you the sort of general breakdown. 20% of them will be network fundamentals, 26% of them will be LAN switching fundamentals, and so on and so forth. Now you can click on Show Details, and this is expanded for you if you download the PDF. And he'll show you what you need to study. All right, so these are the names of the topics that you need to study right here. And once again, nice, not displaying the right thing. I got to get used to this. All right, sorry about that. Let me go back here. I know what happened. There we go. All right, so let me just, so right here under, we did review the exam topics. Here are the percentages of how the topics will play out in the actual exam. And even though you didn't see it, I was highlighting this, 90 minutes, 45 to 55 questions. Okay. And then when we click on Show Details and expand something, you can see these are the various topics within LAN switching fundamentals that you can expect to see. Now, will you get questions on each and every one of these? No, you will not. So when you take these exams, they're pulling questions from a huge question pool. So the overall question pool might have like 600 questions in it, and then they randomly pull 20 from, and those questions, of those 600 questions, maybe 95 of them are LAN switching fundamentals. So they'll pull, 26% from that. So every time you take the exam, some questions you will see will be the same and some questions will be different. But the questions could cover any of these topics that you see right here. Okay, so now we know what the topics are from the blueprint. Another place that you can also discover where the topics are, you might say, well, wait a second, another place? Are you telling me that there are potentially things I could be tested on that aren't here in the blueprint? Unfortunately, yes. So I don't know why Cisco does this, but there is a distinct possibility, almost a probability, that you will be hit with questions that are on topics that do not fall within the scope of the blueprint here. Now, there's two possible reasons for this. Number one, before you start the exam, one of the disclaimers that you'll see on the computer screen when you're sitting in front of it is it will tell you that there are some questions that are inserted into the exam that are experimental questions. In other words, these are questions, you don't know when they are. It could be question number 7, it could be question number 32. You have no idea as you're going through the exam which questions fall into this experimental category. But you're not graded on them, which doesn't do you a whole lot of good because you don't know which ones are experimental and which ones aren't, so you got to take all the questions seriously. But when you do get an experimental question, it doesn't count towards your grade. Cisco is just putting it in there to try to get sort of a general feel of what do people already know or not know about this subject. Is this something that maybe we should put into the next revision of this exam? Okay, so if you get a question that's like, what the heck? This was not in the blueprint? Maybe it's an experimental question that you're seeing. Unfortunately, there is a second reality, which is that sometimes you just get testable questions that count towards your score that aren't covered in the blueprint. I don't know why. I don't think it's entirely fair that they do that, but that might happen. So you might be wondering, well, how am I supposed to prepare for a topic that's not even here in the blueprint? Well, let me give you one other alternative that you can look at. Actually, you should use these in conjunction here. So O'Reilly Books has sort of like so O'Reilly is a publisher of technical books. They have like a sub-publishing department called Cisco Press. And Cisco Press comes up with all Cisco-related books. So for virtually every Cisco certification exam, ICND 1, ICND 2, all the CCNPs, the CCIEs, books come out to help you study. And the books generally fall into sort of like two general titles. You have official certification guides and foundation learning guides. All right, so for example, for the ICND 1, there's a big, thick, like 600-page book that's the official certification guide, and there's another big, thick book that's the ICND 1 foundation learning guide. The foundation learning guides generally go into a little bit more depth on the protocols and how they work, so ideally, you would get both of them, but that leads me to what I was about to talk to. I would recommend that in addition to looking at the blueprint, you purchase a copy of, at minimum, the official certification guidebook for whatever the test is that you're studying. Because if there's a topic within the book, and remember, this is a Cisco Press book, which means that whoever wrote it, it had to be edited by Cisco, it had to be approved and blessed by Cisco. So we can safely assume that if a topic is in that book, even if it's not on the blueprint, that is a testable topic. So that's the other way. So you should combine the blueprints with the books, and that'll give you your best clues about what topics you need to study. Now, talking about the books, that leads me into my second objective, which is, okay, now how do I know how much depth I need to go into, how much detail? For example, EIGRP is a routing protocol. It's tested all the way up to the CCIE level. There's all sorts of nuances and various little tricks to EIGRP that you don't have to know at the CCNA level, but you do have to know for those higher level exams. Well, if you were just did a Google search on EIGRP, you might come up with a white paper that's like 12 pages long, 30 pages long. How would you know in there what was CCNA stuff and what was beyond the scope of the CCNA? That's another reason I really recommend you go with the Cisco Press books for the certification that you're studying. Let's take a look at them. Now, I recognize that not everybody has access to this, but one fantastic tool that I love is Safari Online Books. So if you go to Google, if you're not familiar with this, from Google, if you type Safari, like, I'm going on an African safari, Safari Books Online. So here it is. And this is a subscription-based service. And if you subscribe to this, and you can do it monthly, you get a little bit more of a break if you do like a whole year in advance, but you get access to thousands of books. And pretty much all the Cisco Press books are in here. So instead of paying, that one official certification guidebook, actually, let's take a look. Let's just see, how much would it cost me from Amazon if I was to purchase the ICND 1 book? So Cisco ICND 1 official. All right, so the ICND 1 official book, hardcover, looks like the most recent version, 2016, is right now on sale for roughly $22. All right, 22 bucks. For a little bit more than that, you could get 1 month of subscription to Safari and have access to thousands of books. So I really love Safari. So once you're in Safari, once you sign up for it, if you choose to do so, you can click up here in the search field and just type Cisco ICND 1 official. And there it is. Official cert guide. And it should come up here in just a moment. There it is. Official certification guidebook. Okay. Now, one other thing here to notice. See how they have two of them? Official cert guide for both. One's green, one's blue. These books also come in two different editions. The green one, I believe, is what they call the academic edition. And a very common question is, okay, what's the difference in a particular Cisco Press book? They both have the same title. What's the difference between the one that's the academic and the one that's not the academic? Well, virtually nothing. And I found a great post from the actual author, Wendell Odom, who explained this a while back. Basically, what he said was that the academic editions were designed around the idea that this is a textbook you're using when you go to a class. So there's some actual instructor who's teaching you ICND 1, and he or she is using the academic book as the textbook. So usually when you go to a class, what do? Right? You learn something, you read something, and at the very end of learning something, you get tested on it. So the academic books are like that. You have the foundation topics, all the technical topics, and at the end of every chapter, you have a quiz or a multiple choice quiz to see if you know it. The non-academic versions places the quiz at the beginning of the section. They basically have it at the beginning of every chapter. For example, I'll click on one right here. So let's see here. Let's do view table of contents. So I was talking about EIGRP, so let's just find that in here. Oh, this is this ICND 1 that I did? Yeah, so EIGRP I don't think is an ICND 1. Let's just do OSPF. That's another routing protocol. Okay, so you can see here at the beginning it has a do I know this already quiz. And they're anywhere from, like in this case, it's only 8 questions. Sometimes they go up to like 18 questions. So the quiz will be at the beginning. And at the end of the book, it'll have the appendix that shows you the answers to this. So that's one of the only questions, is the academic edition, quiz are at the end of the chapter, non-academic, quiz are at the beginning. The only other difference is like some colors. Wendell Odom said some of the graphics use a different color scheme, but they're really, for all intents and purposes, exactly the same book. So there's really nothing. So, as I was talking about, if you have a question of, okay, well, I have a bullet point in the blueprint that says I need to learn OSPF version 2. Huge, monstrous topic, goes way up to the CCIE level. Well, if you open up the official certification guidebook for ICND 1 and you see OSPF version 2 in here, anything that you see in here is potentially testable. Anything you see. If it's not in here, you can probably safely ignore it. It's probably at a higher level than what you need to know. Okay? So that's another good way of finding out, how much depth do I need to go into? Read the book. Whatever the certification books, whatever depth they go into is the appropriate depth that you're going to want. So those are the official Cisco Press books. And then lastly, there's always videos, right? We've got our INE CCNA videos, and I can't speak to the other authors who've recorded videos because we've got a lot of authors who've recorded CCNA. But for me personally, I've created some CCNA videos, and when I'm speaking, when I'm recording myself, I try to keep my scope confined to what a CCNA would need to know. I try to think to myself, okay, if I was hiring someone into my company as a network administrator, and they said they had a CCNA, as far as OSPF, what would I expect them to know? So when I create my videos, I will do the same thing I just told you. I'll say, okay, the blueprint here says that they need to know OSPF version 2. All right? Then I'll go to the official Cisco Press book and I'll see what level of detail they go into for OSPF version 2. And then I'll create my videos around that. Now in my videos, I also take a lot more time talking about, here's why you would want to use this. Here's the problem that was solved by this protocol or by this feature. Here's some scenarios where this feature or protocol probably would not be useful if this is what you're trying to do. Here's some common troubleshooting. So in the videos, I'll go a bit above and beyond what you would see in the book to try to make it more real, more user-friendly to the people who are watching the videos. But certainly that's another place to go. And once again, if you're not an INE customer, I just want to show you a real quick and easy and free way where you can see what videos we do have so you can just see if it's something that would interest you or not. So if you just go to streaming.ine.com. All right, so let me just zoom in on this here so you can see it. So streaming.ine.com, anybody should be able to get there. That will take you to this website right here, and you can see all the videos we have. Now you're not going to actually be able to play the videos, but for example, if you click on Cisco and CCNA, routing and switching, now we're talking about ICND 1. So that is right here. All right, so here's at least the ones that I did, the ICND 1 video series. So if you click on that, anybody in the world should be able to get to this level right here. And you can see how many videos are in this particular course. You can see the names of the videos. You can see how long the videos are. So this will give you a good feel for, if this course or any other video course that we offer is something that would be interesting to you. All right, so with that, let's go to another Q&A and see if there's anything I can help you with. All right. Uh-oh. Crud. kidding me? All right, so I just logged in. I just noticed just now that it looked like the video was frozen, which really stinks. So can you guys just briefly share with me what the last thing was that you saw me talking about? I'm not entirely sure how long the screen was frozen, so I could use your help to figure out what you guys saw me talking about last. I was talking about the exam topics, okay. Did you see me sharing the Safari online books? Did you see me sharing what that looks like, how to go in there, how to open up a book online and go through it? Okay, so it looks like I did not get to that point. All right, so let me just do that again real quickly then. So what I was mentioning was when you take a look at the blueprint will show you, let's go back to that real quick. It'll show you the percentage of questions you will see in each topic. And then if you click on Show Details, it'll show you more details about what particular bulleted items you need to know within that topic. So that's one way to answer the question of what topics do I need to learn or memorize to pass my CCNA. Definitely start here with the blueprint. I also mentioned that sometimes there are topics on the exam that are not in the blueprint. And that might be because sometimes you'll get experimental questions that don't count towards your grade. You won't know them. They're just going to be part of your exam. You will not know which question is experimental. But if you're getting a question, you say, what? This is not something that's in the blueprint. I didn't study this. Maybe it's an experimental question. Or sometimes, this doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes you will actually get a legitimate testable question that just isn't on the blueprint. I don't know why that happens. I don't think it's nice, but that is a possibility. I said, okay, well, how do you prepare for that? Well, there's an alternative way to discover what topics are testable on the exam besides the blueprint. The blueprint is your first go-to source. Your other place is if you go to Google and from Google you type in Safari Books Online. Now what is this? Cisco has a publishing house. It's actually tied to O'Reilly Publishing. So O'Reilly is a publisher of lots of technical books, and Cisco Press is sort of like a sub-entity of O'Reilly. And Cisco Press publishes all kinds of books about Cisco stuff, and every single certification exam they have pretty much has a book that goes along with it. And so when you are studying for these exams, at minimum, you're going to want to get what's called the official certification guidebook that goes along with the exam you're studying for. And within that certification guidebook, if there's a topic in there and it's not on the blueprint, that's also potentially testable. Anything you see in those official certification guides are potentially testable items. So I was mentioning how I went onto Amazon and I saw the official certification guidebook for ICND 1 was about like $27 or $28 right now on sale. Safari Books gives you access to thousands of books. It's a subscription-based thing. So look at this, you can sign up for 10 days for free. I'm not sure what their current pricing is for this. I'm sure someday, somewhere on here it says that. But why is it shop? I don't want shop. I just want to get into Safari Books. All right, here we go. So once you pay for a subscription, if you choose to do this, okay, you're always free to actually buy the book if you want. Then you can go on here and you can say ICND 1 official And there we go. ICND1 official cert guide. Okay, so once again, I realized I wasn't sharing the correct screen. I went to Google, I typed in Safari Books Online, which brought me to here. Safari Books Online. All right, then once you log in, if you're looking for a particular book, Cisco ICND1 official. Do a search on that. And then in Houston, we have a problem, of course. Of course that happens. Let's see here. But I think I have this up in another screen that I can show you. Yes. Okay, so like right here, I'm in the ICND1 official certification guidebook right now. And maybe I had a question about OSPF version 2. You know, the blueprint tells me that I need to learn OSPF version 2. What it doesn't tell me is how much detail do I need to know for OSPF version 2? How much depth? Because I don't want to study CCNP and CCIE stuff. I want to study CCNA stuff. So going into the official certification guidebook for that exam is a perfect way of just constraining what you're learning to stuff that's relevant for the exam that you're about to take. I also mentioned here that on these books, there are two different flavors. There's the academic edition and the non-academic edition. And sometimes there's questions about what's the difference between those two. Virtually nothing. The academic edition has the chapter. At the end of the chapter, you have a quiz, a multiple choice question. The non-academic edition just flips it. At the very beginning of the chapter, like you see right here at the very top, you have a Do I Know This Already quiz where you can test yourself, and then you have the technical stuff that follows that. So I always tell people, hey, if it's in the book, it is a potentially testable item. So that's another way to answer the question of how much detail do I need to know and what topics do I need to know. You want to pair up the blueprint along with these books right here. And then the last thing I mentioned was, in addition to the books, it's always a good idea also to get your hands on some videos as well. You know, learning by using multiple senses, not just reading, but by listening and watching videos can help reinforce what you're learning. And I point out that, of course, here at INE, we have a whole bunch of videos regarding CCNA stuff. And you can sort of get a preview of what they look like by going to streaming.ine.com. All right, so right there, streaming.ine. Anybody, you don't have to have a INE membership or anything to get to this page. Anybody in the world can get to this, streaming.ine.com. And then once you're here, just click on Cisco and click on CCNA, routing and switching. And for example, here you can see right here is the ICND1 technology video series that I recorded. And you can click on that. And this is about as far as you can go. If you haven't actually purchased the product, this is as far as the general public can go. You can see the titles of the videos, the duration of the videos. And when I recorded my CCNA videos, I did it basically the same way I described to you. I looked at the blueprint first. I made note of what was there. I went to the official certification guides to see how much detail they went into. I, of course, used my own experience from having taken the CCNA exam about what I saw in the exam, and then I crafted my videos appropriately. So the detail would be right in line with what somebody needs to learn. So those are the various ways that you can answer those questions about what do I need to learn and how much of that do I need to learn. Which brought us to our Q&A section. So what questions do you guys have for me? All right, so networking has a good question. It says, we can study CCNA without real devices. So in an interview, we are asked to configure real devices. How can I do this? All right. This leads to a good question. Sometimes people will ask me, could I learn everything I need to learn to pass my CCNA just based on watching videos and reading books? Technically, the answer to that is yes, you could, right? Just like, well, because it is a computer-based exam, right? So you could, for example, if I said, hey, technically, if I was to take a multiple choice computer-based exam all about speaking French, all right, so I'm going to learn how to speak the French language, and the way they're going to test me on it is a computer-based exam that's multiple choice. Technically, without ever speaking a word of French, could I pass that exam simply by watching videos, reading stuff, and just memorizing what I read? Yes, you could. But does that mean you can actually do it? No, I couldn't actually speak French in that way. So in the same way here, you know, the CCNA exam, number one, there's going to be a lot of questions in there testing your knowledge of the commands, the iOS commands to do stuff. There's going to be multiple choice questions that say, which command below is the appropriate command to do this? And you'll have to identify it. And then certainly there's the simulations, the router simulations and the testlets where you have to go into a virtual device and configure it. That requires that you know the Cisco iOS commands. Now, can you learn those commands purely by memorization, by reading? Yes, you can, but in reality, and I was going to get to this in the next section coming up, part of your process for studying for the CCNA is to actually practice this stuff. Practice routing and switching on routers and switches. There's no better way to practice the commands and to memorize those commands than to actually do it. And the next section I'm going to talk about, well, where do I go? How do I get that opportunity to practice those commands? So that's how you would prepare for that interview, right? If you're thinking that you're going to have an interview where they might ask you to actually configure something, which they might, you want to have some actual hands-on practice before that interview to be prepared for that. Salim asks, is Frame Relay still there in the ICND2? No, it's not. Frame Relay was removed from the CCNA a couple of years ago, so it is no longer on there. Okay. All right. And Happy, it looks like you're about to... Oh, let's... All right, Happy, it looks like you're about to ask some questions here. Anybody else have any questions? Salim, good question. When's the CCNP going to be revised? Is it 2018? I don't know. I wish I knew that. It's due to be revised. So Cisco certification exams in general get revised and come out with a new revision roughly every 3 to 4 years. And the last time the CCNP was updated was back in 2015. So I think it was like January of 2015. So we're pretty much at that 3-year mark right now. So I would expect anytime this year or maybe next year it will be revised. But Cisco doesn't tell people that in advance. I don't have any inside Cisco sources who tell me anything like that. So I honestly don't know, but I would expect it to be revised soon. So is it better to go for the CCNP this year? It depends on where you are in your studying process. One of the nice things that Cisco does when they do revise an exam is that, for example, they will send out a notification on their website or something saying, okay, the new CCNP exam is out. They'll say it's out, but they'll give you like a 6-month window. And they'll say within the next 6 months, you have a choice. You can continue to either take the old exam or you can take the new exam. But once that 6-month window is up, then the old exam is no longer available After that point, all you can take is a new exam. So is it better to go for the CCNP this year or not? Well, for one thing, the CCNP is 3 exams. It's route, switch, and T-shoot. So it's 3 exams you have to study for. It will take you a year to prepare and pass those 3 exams. There's a lot to know. The good thing, though, is that when a revision comes out, it's not like all the stuff from the old exam is wiped away and all that stuff you were studying is useless. That's not the case. For example, when the CCNA came out with their update, okay, whenever that was like 2016, I think that was, when it went to the CCNA version 3, a lot of people were stressed because they had been preparing for the CCNA and now this new update came out. Well, the reality is that 80% or 85% of what was in the old CCNA carried on into the new CCNA. They shuffled some stuff around, like for example, stuff that was in the ICND2, they moved over to the ICND1 and vice versa. And there was some new stuff as well, but by and large, the vast majority of stuff that was in the old test was moved into the new test. Very few stuff was actually removed, like frame relay as an example. Yes, that was removed. So if somebody had been studying frame relay, that was a bummer because that was no longer in the test. But usually it's more a case of adding stuff, not necessarily removing stuff. So when the CCNP does come out, I will expect that there's not going to be a whole lot removed from it. Like for example, right now the CCNP does have frame relay in it. That's still in there. I fully expect that to be gone. Whenever the revision comes out, I fully expect frame relay to be one of those like 5 or 6 topics that they delete from the exam. Now what new stuff is going to be in there, who knows? It's anybody's guess. Also, I have not looked this up, but somebody recently told me that, and this is all I'm going to say about CCNP because this is really a CCNA kickoff, but for CCNP, someone told me that once you take and pass one of the exams, you have a year before you have to pass the next exam. So because there's 3 exams, technically you've got like a year and a half from the time you pass the first one until you're done, until you're ready, till you got your CCNP. So if you passed, for example, route, and now you're studying for switch, and all of a sudden, surprise, switch has been revised, don't worry about your route, right? As long as you get your switch within 1 year of having passed the route, you're okay. Okay, so let's move on. In this next topic, I'm going to be talking about studying tips. So these are all the things you want to try to utilize when you're studying to get the most effective use out of your time and not get derailed. Okay, so we pretty much already talked about most of this: videos, books, and online documents. If you're like me, when I'm reading about a new topic for the first time, I like to read about from multiple different sources. For example, one of the things I was just refreshing myself on, because it had been a long time since I read about it, was an IPv6 technology called NAT64. Okay, you don't have to know NAT64, it's a CCNP thing, but in order to really drill NAT64 into my brain, I read it in the official certification guidebook, which was very small. There's almost nothing in there about that. And then I went on Google and I read it through like 6 or 7 different documents about that technology. So you definitely want to read about something from multiple different sources before it's probably going to click in your head. Number 2, utilize many practice exams. Many practice exams. So I don't have my my backpack in here, but as, for example, right now I'm going through the CCNA security stuff because security kind of interests me, and I thought, hey, maybe I should get a CCNA security. That'd be kind of cool. So I'm looking at the CCNA security official certification guidebook. Just like routing and switching, it's got the do I know this quiz at the beginning followed by the topics. So one of the things I've done is I've gone to my Xerox machine, my copier, and I've copied that onto paper like 4 or 5 times. So I can take that do I know this quiz multiple times rather than opening up my book and scratching up my book and doing it that way. That's one example of a practice exam. If you search online on Google like CCNA practice exam, you'll find tons of them. And of course, we here at INE have our share of practice exams as well. So once again, if you go to streaming.ine.com, I'll zoom out on this, and you click on, where is it? Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. Okay, well, if you go through it this way, there's only one practice exam that you can see, which is here in the right corner. CCNA routing and switching practice exam. That one's okay, but that one's based on the earlier version of the CCNA. So what you're going to want to do, and at some point it'll show up here in the search engine, they're working on that right now, is type in, for example, ICND 1, and let's see here. How about just practice? Well, CCNP practice exam is coming up here. I'll tell you what. Here's what I'm going to do. Oops. I'm going to give you we have an ICND 1 and an ICND 2 practice exam. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to search for it, and our developers right now are trying to fix that. So in the meantime, I'm going to give you guys the direct links for it. Now, clearly you'd have to purchase something, the CCNA or whatever, to get to that. All right, so here we go. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make this bigger. If you guys just want to take a screenshot of that, that will get you to the ICND 1 practice exam that we have. And like I said, you have to either purchase that as a standalone product or get our CCNA bundle or something, which will include that practice exam. And then let me give you the link to the ICND 2 practice exam. All right, and I'll zoom in on that. There's the link to the ICND 2 practice exam if you want to do a screen capture of that. Now these practice exams, I designed it to be as close of an experience as you would get when taking the real CCNA as possible. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, if we click on it, begin practice exam attempt, so just like the real CCNA, this is a timed exam. So you can see right here, you will be given 60 multiple choice questions based on a larger pool of questions. And you'll be given 90 minutes, the exact same amount of time you would have if you took the real test, 1 hour and 30 minutes. Begin practice exam. And so you'll be given a question. It'll say, if it's just a single answer, it'll say select the best answer. So I'm just going to randomly select something here. Select 4 answers. All right, let's just select 4. A lot of these questions will have screenshots of things like this. So this is how you would be tested on your knowledge of Cisco iOS. Okay, up here you provide a scenario, and then here, which of these answers is the correct series of commands to do what the question is asking you to do. I'm not going to do clearly all 60 of them. Up here in the upper left corner, as you're going through it, You can see here, it'll tell you how much time you have remaining. And unlike the real CCNA, you can pause this one in case you need to go to the restroom or eat lunch or something. It'll tell you how far you are into it, 4 out of 56. Now let's say you say, oh man, I'm done. I don't have any more time to do this. My lunch is over. That's fine. You don't have to do all 56 questions. Just click on End and Submit for grading. And okay, good. Question number 4, I got that correct. Oh, I messed up on question number 3, so you can click on that. And by the way, just like the real CCNA exam, this pulls the same quantity of questions out of the question pool. So if the real CCNA exam says 26% of the questions are based on routing technologies, 26% of these questions will be based on routing technologies. If you click on one, you can see it says, all right, so this is what I selected. This is what the correct answer was. And you saw how we have that for both ICND 1 and ICND 2. So I would definitely recommend that you, if you don't look at ours, at least look at someone's practice exams and do as many practice exams as possible. Flashcards. I am a big proponent of using flashcards. So with flashcards, you have the online versions. For example, there is a website you can go to and create your own free flashcards, which is called StudyBlue. StudyBlue.com. And from here, I don't know if, okay, I've still got my login credentials. That's nice. So from StudyBlue.com, you can create your own flashcards. For example, here's some flashcards I created as prerequisites for people attending my CCNA bootcamp. Study now. I want to study all the flashcards in random order. Study. And these are flashcards that I just created myself. Okay, great. I got that one right. Let's move on. Okay, what does that translate to in binary? Okay, that translates to 31. Great. Okay, got that right. So you can just, so this way you can create online flashcards for yourself. I personally like creating real flashcards that I can hold in my hand. So I'll purchase a big thick set of like 3x5 blank note cards, and then as I'm watching a video, I will frequently pause it and write a question on the front, write the answer on the back. As I'm going through an official certification guide, as I see it mentions something like a port number or a protocol number or a timer or something like that, I'll create a flashcard for myself. And then when I'm doing my studying as part of my like 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day of studying, I'll typically start out quizzing myself on my flashcards, and then I'll end quizzing myself on my flashcards. Also, a nice thing about real flashcards that you create is you can take them with you anywhere. Take them with you in the car, right? So when you're stopped at that red light, whip out a flashcard, right? When you are eating dinner, hand your wife the flashcards. Hey, would you mind testing me, honey, on some of this stuff, right? Hand your dog the flashcards. Hey, Barney, would you mind testing me on the, oh, you know, have whoever you want test you on the flashcards. That's a great thing about real physical flashcards. You can carry them with you into the bathroom. You know, wherever you want to go, you can test yourself. Can't really take this into the bathroom with you unless you're looking kind of suspicious. So I definitely would recommend flashcards. Study with a group if possible. So what I'm talking about here with as a group, it means try to find like a CCNA study group. Now, ideally, this would be a group of physical people that you're sitting with. You meet like once a week or daily at like a coffee shop or something. But even if you find an online group, it's a great way. Now, here's, in my mind, the best study groups are study groups that make all the participants accountable. In other words, if the study group is on Tuesday, I just say, oh, I'm going to skip it. I don't really feel like it tonight. What good is that doing me, right? If I have the freedom to just come and go as I wish, nobody even knows if I'm there, nobody cares if I'm there, how is that helping me? In my mind, this is what a great study group looks like. Let's say we're talking about a virtual study group online, okay? So we're all meeting online through GoToMeeting.com or Cisco's WebEx or something like that. So somebody's hosting the study group, and maybe the facilitator would say, okay, Our study group is coming to a close. So next time we meet, we're all going to read pages 50 through 60 of Chapter 2 in the ICND1 study guide. In addition to that, I want every single one of us to come back with 2 multiple choice questions that you've created and you're willing to share with the group. Right, so right there, that puts me on the spot. I have to read it and I have to create some multiple choice questions I'm going to share with the group. Also, I'm going to be expected to answer everybody else's questions, provide feedback on their questions. Also in the study group, the facilitator might say, okay, Tom, it's your turn. So the next time we meet, we want you prepared to give like a little 10-minute presentation on spanning tree root bridges. That's what we're studying next week. So we would like you to create like a little 10-minute presentation. You can use PowerPoint, whiteboard, whatever, but we want you to present to us. So that's another thing that makes people accountable, forcing them to teach other people in the study group and make that go like round robin, right? Where everybody's responsible for teaching something. So think of ways where everybody can get engaged. Everybody has to provide something to the group, bring something to the table, and it's noticed if you're not there. You're missed if you're not there. And quite frankly, a good study group should have a policy that says, look, if you miss a certain amount of sessions, you're out. I mean, clearly you're not serious if you've missed, X amount of sessions, and that should be up to you. If I was facilitating a study group, I would say, hey, look, I expect everybody to be there a minimum of 4 weeks out of every 5. Hey, you can miss 1 week out of every 5, but if you miss more than that, I'm sorry, but you're no longer benefiting yourself, you're no longer benefiting us, you shouldn't be here. So that's my idea of what I mean by when I say study with a group if possible. Now, if you're actually studying with a real group of people, that's even better, because then you can say, hey, let's every Wednesday and Thursday, let's meet at Starbucks from 4 to 6 p.m. You can sit down, you're all there, and you all read together. You all read the same chapter together, and you can say, hey, John, you reading page 2 here? You see this paragraph? What do you think that means? I really don't understand that. And then, well, I think that means this. And Sally says, oh, I think it means this. So that's another great way of getting some live feedback with a real study group of people. All right, what else? Refer back to old topics often. Those certification guidebooks are massively thick. If you were to buy one, I wasn't kidding when I said it's like 500-600 pages. There is a lot of stuff you have to learn and memorize to get your CCNA. And if all you're doing is focusing on the chapter that you're reading right now, quizzing yourself on that stuff right now, and then you move on to the next one, but you'd never go back, you'll forget those old topics. So once again, this is another great use of flashcards, right? Quiz yourself on flashcards all the time and go back to those old topics so that you don't forget them. Watch videos that you've already seen, right? Watch the first set of videos that you watched like 2 months ago. Go back to those. Watch them again. Frequent lab practice. All right, so let's talk about this. I mentioned that part of getting your CCNA is demonstrating that you have some sort of proficiency with Cisco's software, with the commands in their software. And I mentioned that they're going to test you on that in multiple choice questions, router simulations, a whole variety of ways. So the best way to learn a language, right, whether it be Cisco software or an actual foreign language, is to do it, is to practice it. So you're going to want to practice this stuff over and over and over again, which leads me to my next thing. Where do you go to practice it? At the CCNA level, which is what I'm assuming you guys are going for if you're watching me here, I would recommend that you download a free software tool from Cisco called Packet Tracer. Doesn't cost anything. You just have to enroll in Cisco's Network Academy, but once again, that doesn't cost anything. You don't have to attend any classes. You just sign up, and then you can download Packet Tracer. And I believe I have Packet Tracer on this laptop. So I'll show you what it looks like. Where are you, Packet Tracer? Here we go. So when you open up Packet Tracer, and I'll move this onto the other screen here so that you can see it. So this is what Packet Tracer looks like. And it's a simulation tool where you can just drag and drop routers and stuff in your topology. Okay, maybe I want to do some switches switch here, maybe a switch here. You connect them together with various different cables, and you create, topologies out of this. And then once you've got the topology working, you can click on device, go in the command line, and start configuring it. So this is a great way to practice your knowledge of Cisco iOS commands. Now the next question would be, okay, but so I've got this tool, what do I do with it? How do I know what to do with it? Well, so when it comes to building labs or working with labs to practice your knowledge of Cisco iOS, there's two different approaches. One approach is as you're watching a video, as you're reading a book, you're always thinking to yourself, how could I do this? Given the resources I have, like given Packet Tracer, this book is talking about EIGRP. It's showing me how 3 routers speak EIGRP. You should be thinking about in the back of your head, okay, well, why don't I do that? Why don't I create that same scenario in Packet Tracer and try to get it to do the same things? Or maybe you start writing down on a piece of paper, like a list of objectives. Okay, I'm studying EIGRP right now. So this chapter right now I'm reading just talked about how 2 routers discover each other and form a neighbor relationship between each other. Okay, so that'd be one of the things I'd write down. Form EIGRP neighbor relationship. As I'm reading the chapter, it says, these various things when they're talking to each other have to match. They have to have these certain parameters that match so they'll talk to each other. If they don't match, they won't. So maybe on my piece of paper I'll say, intentionally mismatch X, Y, and Z to see what happens. So I'll start creating a lab for myself on a piece of paper based on objectives and things I want to accomplish. And then I'll just whip up Packet Tracer right here, build it, see if it'll work. So that's one way of doing labs, which is just basically coming up with the objectives yourself, building a sort of a creative lab yourself and just testing things based on what you want to do, based on what you're reading. Other people prefer a more structured approach where somebody else has already gone through the legwork of creating like a workbook of a lab. And I'll just show you the workbooks that we have so you can see what those look like. So for the ICND 2, we just had a workbook that just came out literally like a week or 2 ago. And it's all based on Packet Tracer. All right, ICND 2 workbook. So let me go back here. So in the ICND 2 workbook, now this is a video-based board. I'll show you the 2 different kinds that we have. This is a video-based workbook where, let's say you're learning about VTP, the VLAN trunking protocol. So you can see right here, implementing VTP. So this workbook assumes that you've got Cisco's Packet Tracer, and so it'll give you a topic like implementing VTP. And then in that video, it'll say, okay, here's what you need to do. Here are your objectives. So you'll see yours truly coming up here. And I'll say, okay, here's your task, implementing VTP. And I will describe what the objectives are for this. So I'll verbally describe it. And then once I've gone through, here's what you need to do. Here are your objectives. Then at that point, I expect you to go into Packet Tracer. Now in this particular workbook, if you get this, it comes with it here on the left under, and I'll zoom in on this so you can see it. There's a section that says View Course Files. If you click on that, you can download a zip file. And the zip file has in it a bunch of pre-programmed Packet Tracer topologies. All right, so let me move this over here. So like in several videos, I will say, okay, use workbook topology number 1. So if you load that onto Packet Tracer, it'll already come pre-programmed, and now watch my video, try to do the objective, and then once you're done, or if you get stuck, go to the solution for that. And in the solution video, I walk you through, okay, here's in PackTracer how you did this. So these are video-based workbooks. We also have, most of our workbooks are more of this other type. For example, our ICND 1 workbook looks like this. So for example, if we're talking about RIP version 2, I click on that. So here, this is all like a web-based workbook. It'll show you a topology. Now this workbook, along with most of our other workbooks, assumes that you are renting time on our equipment. Now that's another alternative. And instead of PackTracer, you could actually get on real Cisco routers and switches and practice them. Now, at the CCNA level, you could buy your own routers and switches and build your own rack, which there's definitely a lot of benefits to doing that. But another thing you could do is you could just rent time on somebody else's racks, like ours. And these workbooks here are based on that assumption. I'll show you that in just 1 second, what that looks like. But assuming you're renting, let's say you're renting a couple of hours this afternoon on our CCNA racks. Well then, you would, in this workbook, you would preload a topology. So this here gives the name of the topology, and I'm not going to go into how to preload it right now. That's beyond the scope of this. But you'd load it onto your rack. So now your rack would come up, and it would be preloaded with a lot of this stuff. And then you would just read these objectives, try to make it work. And then right here, you click to expand. And in this workbook, it says, okay, here's what you should have configured. Here's what you should have seen with various show commands and things. And so that's, whether it's a video-based workbook or whether it's a web-based workbook, the idea is the same, is that somebody else, either me or some other company, has decided what the objective should be. They've written down or videotaped what the objective is that you need to accomplish, the things you need to do. And then they provide some sort of solution as far as, okay, this is what you should have configured. This is what you should have seen when you configured it. So instead of doing your own labs where you come up with your own stuff, a workbook is an alternative approach if you like a more structured approach. And I did promise you, just real quickly, I would show you what our rack rentals are like in case you want to rent time on our racks. So from the members dashboard, and remember, this I said was completely free to go into, to sign up for a free INE members account. From here, you would click on where it says rack rentals. And we have a variety of different racks from CCIE all the way down to CCNA level. And so for you, you'd be clicking on the CCNA, CCNP routing and switching. So let me just click on this real quickly here. You'd start by looking at the rack rental guide. So this is real equipment, okay? So unlike PackTracer, which is just a software tool, when you rent time on our racks, you're getting 4 physical routers and 3 physical switches. They are already pre-cabled for you. And you're getting time on this rack. Now, what you do on the rack with your hour or 2 or 3 hours that you rent, it's completely up to you. You could use that time to follow along in a workbook. You could use that time to create your own labs and test your own stuff out. It's your dedicated time that you've rented. So if I go back to it, so notice the CCNA rack is 3 tokens per hour. What is that? All right, so the way that you get time on a rack is that in advance, you purchase tokens. And so right here it says purchase tokens. And we have sales on tokens all the time. We might even be having a sale right now that I don't know about. But the list price of a token is $1. 1 token equals $1, if they're not on sale. So for example, you could get 100 tokens for $100. And then if you go back, you can see here that the CCNA rack is 3 tokens per hour. So that's $3 an hour. So if you purchased 100 tokens, you've got, what, roughly 33 hours that you could rent on this rack. And so you just go through the scheduling process. And then once you've scheduled time on the rack, you would just get into the rack via some sort of tool like Putty or Secure CRT, and now you're at a menu, and you can start working with it. Now, if this is something that interests you, we have, I believe, if you go back to the members, actually let's go back to streaming.ine.com. If you just click on rack, there should be, yeah, right here. So we have a video series called How to Use INE's Rack Rental System for CCNA and CCNP Preparation. I've been told that this is a free video series, that anybody in the world should be able to watch this. So you should be able to go right to these videos here. And there's a series of videos that I created all about how to use the rack rental system, how to find the rack that's appropriate for you, how to rent time on it, how to see if the rack is available, how to navigate around in the rack. The whole video series is less than 2 hours. So this is another alternative for you for doing lab practice, which is renting time on somebody's racks and doing it that way. But definitely, before you take your CCNA exam, either the ICND1 or the ICND2, you will want to be very comfortable with the iOS command line. And the best way to do that is to actually do it with either Packet Tracer or this. Now, there are other alternatives out there as well. For example, there's something called GNS3. Cisco has a solution called Viral. But I'll be honest with you, at the CCNA level, those solutions are probably too complex for a lot of people. A lot of people will just, at the CCNA level where they know nothing about networking, downloading that software, getting it working, just getting it ready is overkill. So I think between Packet Tracer and or renting time on real equipment, I think those are your best ways to go as far as getting your lab time, getting lab practice. And then lastly, you want to get familiar with Wireshark. What is Wireshark, you may ask? Well, so Wireshark, you see, your laptop or your PC, whatever you have, is connected to a network, or if you're doing Wi-Fi, you're doing Wi-Fi. But basically, there is a lot of information and data that your laptop is receiving that when it looks at it, your laptop says, this is not for me. And so your laptop deletes it. It's still seeing it, but deletes it. There's also a lot of stuff that you're doing out in the background. When you bring up a web page, there's a lot of stuff that happens to do that. When you bring up email, right? When you're watching a YouTube video, there's a lot of stuff that's going back and forth. Wireshark is a tool that you can turn on. It's free. Free is good. Free software you can put on your laptop where you can actually, what they call, sniff that information. In other words, you can visually see everything that's going in or going out of your laptop or PC. So the way you get it is to go to wireshark.org. All right, so there it is, wireshark.org. And then from there, you'll just download the software. Now, I've already downloaded it. And once you download it and you start it up, it will look like this. All right, so here's the basic entry screen here for Wireshark. And if I will zoom in on this a little bit right here. Now your output will be probably a little bit different than mine, but what this is showing you is all the networking adapters you have. And so clearly a couple of these, like my Bluetooth and my wired Ethernet, they're dead, right? Flatline, because they're not connected to anything. So clearly you can see everything I'm doing is pretty much over my Wi-Fi connection right now. So knowing that, I would click on that. Actually double click on it. And now we'll start capturing every single Wi-Fi frame that's being seen. And you can see there's a lot of stuff right here. Just capture it for a little bit and then stop. And what's great about this is you can zoom in on some of this stuff. For example, when you're learning at the CCNA level, you're going to be learning about the transmission control protocol, TCP. What better way to learn about TCP than to capture a TCP segment here in Wireshark? So for example, here's one. And it's one thing to read about all the different fields the TCP puts into a piece of data. It's a whole other thing to actually see it. And this really reinforces, oh, okay, here's my port number. Yep, 443. I learned that that's secure HTTP. Okay, here you can see the acknowledgement numbers. You can see the various flags that are in use. So it's just a good way to visually see the stuff that you read about in a book. Wireshark will capture everything that your laptop sees and display it graphically for you. And I'll tell you what, if you're going to get a job in networking as a network admin or network engineer, you will need to know how to use Wireshark. Wireshark is a very common networking tool that people use, and so it will just be better for you if you go into the interview already having some proficiency with Wireshark. And yes, we here at I&E have a Wireshark course. They'll teach you all the details of how to use this as well. So that concludes this section on study tips. What questions do you have for me? All right, so networking, you have a question here. I'm wondering that study to understand really and not take the exams, okay? Because exams can be passed by exam dumps. In my view, if we can answer well in an interview, we can get a job. How about this? Okay, I think I see where you're going. If I'm understanding your question correctly, to rephrase or paraphrase your question, you're saying, look, I don't really care about passing the exam. I want to study this stuff so I can learn it, so I can go into a job interview, and even though I haven't actually gotten the certification, I will be able to verbally express myself and show them that I know the stuff because I've studied it. Is that beneficial? So if that is indeed your question, so let me speak to that. Unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult for you to get an interview for a job in networking if you don't have some kind of a certification, because you're going to be competing with a lot of people that do have certifications. And the cold hard reality is that I guess a lot of it depends on your experience, but if an employer is looking at a bunch of applications and trying to decide who he or she wants to interview, and if that person has 10 applications, all 10 people are sort of new, they don't really have a lot of networking experience, but 9 of them have Cisco CCNAs and you don't, they're probably not going to invite you in. They're going to invite in the people with the CCNA. It's basically the same reason why a college degree is so important, right? A lot of times when you interview for a job, a lot of employers don't really care what you got your degree in. They don't care what major you got. They just want to see that you have a college degree. Same sort of thing holds true with certifications. So I think you're going to be doing yourself a real disservice if you don't pursue the CCNA certification. And, after all, if you're putting in the time and the effort to learn this stuff, and you really do learn it, you really do know it, why not just cough up the money and get the certification? That way you'll be, competitive with everybody else out there. Clinton, CCNP question. Okay, that's fine, because I don't have any other questions right now coming in, so let's go for it and see what do you say. If I take and pass the route exam, and the CCNP is revised, and the grace period is up, will I need to resit the new route exam, or can I carry on with the new switch/T-shoot? No, if the grace period is, okay, so if the grace period, okay, so when you talk about grace period, I assume what you're talking about is, because in my mind there's 2 grace periods. There's the grace period where it says, okay, during this time frame, you can take the old exam or you can take the new exam. Some people call that a grace period. Or by grace period, you could be saying, okay, after I pass my route exam, I have a 1-year grace period until I have to pass the next exam, like switch or T-shoot. So let's take the first scenario. You take the route exam, you pass it, you start studying for switch, and all of a sudden the new switch exam comes out, they revise it, and by the time you're ready to sit for switch, you can no longer take the old switch exam. Now all you can take is a new switch exam. Well, at that point, it has nothing to do with the route exam, right? As long as you take that new switch exam within 1 year of having passed route, it doesn't really matter if you take the old one or the new one. It doesn't matter. Now, if we're talking about the second grace period, if you've taken the route exam and now 1 year is up, 1 year has expired, and you have not yet taken the switch exam, or T-shoot for that matter, then now you're going to have to go back to route. And if that old route exam is no longer available, you'll have to take the revised route exam. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but hopefully that did. What other questions does anybody have? Or actually, Clinton, reading your question again, I think I see where you're coming from here. So here is the old route. So let's say you pass that. So now you are studying for switch. And let's say right here, new CCNP exams introduced. Okay, so you have, so now here's that grace period. So during this is when you can take the old or new. Okay, now let's say you're not ready to take the switch exam until you've met this point, and now here's where you are at this point. You are right here. Now you're ready to sit for the switch exam. Now it's not a year yet. Maybe from here to here has been 10 months total. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking me, okay, I'm ready now to sit for my switch, but because the grace period is up, is my old route exam still valid? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So even though from this period right here, nobody can take that old route exam anymore, it's gone, it's still not 1 year for you. As long as you pass this switch exam before this 1 year is up, that old route exam you took and passed, that's still good. All right, Salim. Yes, OSPF version 3 does have different LSA types compared to OSPF version 2, but for the purposes of CCNA, you don't have to know anything about that. You don't have to know the new names, the new structure, what they do. That's at the CCNP level. That is not at the CCNA level. What other questions does anybody have? Do I think IT certifications are worth it? Let me know your opinion about certificates. Yeah, I definitely do. Short answer, yes, I do. And the industry seems to think so as well. So Certainly some certifications are more valuable than others. Like for example, if you were comparing Cisco's CCNA certification against the CompTIA Network Plus certification, employers are going to look more favorably upon the Cisco CCNA than they will the Network Plus. But yeah, as a general rule, certifications are definitely valuable to have. Yep. All right, let's talk about the next section. This is going to be super fast because I've already covered a lot of these topics already. And Salim, you're asking about EIGRP version 6. Now, this is a great opportunity. So right now you're asking a question, is this topic covered in the CCNA and what do I need to know about it? All right, so how do we answer that? So like I said, let's go to the official certification guide and find out. So I'm going to go to Safari Online Books. Okay, and I believe EIGRP is covered in the ICND 2. Okay. All right, so let's go to the ICND 2 official certification guide. Okay, now let's just look through the table of contents real quick. All right, LAN switching, it definitely would not be in there. IP version 4 routing, well, we're talking about IP version 6, so it wouldn't be in there. IP version 4 routing protocols, nope, that's IP version 4. Wide area networking, nope. Well, this is, am I looking in the right one? Because frame relay is not part of the CCNA, and yet they have it in here. That's not good, because I know for a fact the CCNA has stripped out frame relay, yet they still have it in here. That is surprising. Wow, okay. WANs, okay, IP version 6. So let's see here, OSPF for IP version 6, they've got that. Yep, so chapter 18, right there. We can see in the official certification guidebook, it does have implementing EIGRP for IPv6, so it is there. And once again, one other good place to check is the blueprint. ICND 2, exam topics, routing technologies. Yep, and it says right there, configure, verify, and troubleshoot EIGRP for IPv6. So we need to know that. All right, so sorry for the network disruption there. I'm not sure what's going on with our... Oh, are you kidding me? What is going on? Okay, I am not sure what's happening here. Let's try this again. there? Well, okay. On my side, let's just see if this is working here. Okay, I think it's working. I just had a... Okay, I think the video and audio is back up. All right, so let's, so this next section here is going to be pretty quick. So my own personal observations from the last time I took the exam, I just wanted to share with you. Okay, so the last time I took the exam, I took the composite exam, or what they call the CCNA accelerated exam. And if you look at the blueprint, it says that there's going to be roughly 60 to 70 questions. I got 64, just so you know, that's how many I received. You are given 90 minutes. Let's talk about scoring. A perfect score is 1,000, and you need at least 810 to pass. So that is a passing score, 810. As far as simulations are concerned, the last time I took it, and I take the CCNA probably once every 9 to 11 months just to refresh myself on what's on it and what topics are emphasized and what topics are not. And the last time I took it, I only got one simulation. The most amount of simulations I've ever gotten is 4. So as far as router simulations are concerned, you can get somewhere, you can expect to see somewhere between 1 and 4 simulations. And I already talked about brain dump in your car. That's the idea that you're going to go to your car, and once you're done, just audibly record your observations and the questions that you got wrong or the questions you had to guess on. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about, and then we will close up our session today, are some common pitfalls. So what I'm going to be talking about here are what are some things that people do that sort of derail their studying attempts or their study efforts, and how can you avoid that yourself? Number 1, failing to adhere or create a dedicated schedule. And I will tell you, I know this from personal experience, I am not as nearly as self-disciplined as I would like to be. And it's really hard for me to do this, but I'll preach to you what I preach to myself here. So you want to make a dedicated schedule. You want to tell yourself, you want to tell your friends and neighbors that every single day from 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock, don't bother me because I'm going to be studying for my CCNA. And you want to adhere to that. You want to put that in your calendar. You want to put it on your smartphone to give you a little ringer there. And don't let anything derail you. It's going to be real easy to put this off, right? 4 o'clock rolls around. Oh, I'm in the middle of a work project. Oh, let me just finish this up and then I'll get to it. And then you don't get to it. Or, oh, I don't really feel like studying today. I'll just, browse CNN.com or something. I'm telling you, if you don't create a dedicated schedule that you stick to, it'll triple the amount of time it takes you to study for the exam and prepare for taking it. Becoming overwhelmed. It's really easy to become overwhelmed because there are so many topics that you need to study for your CCNA. Just some tips or techniques to try to prevent that. Number 1, just concentrate on what you're learning today. In other words, don't start worrying and thinking about all the stuff that you've studied that you may have forgotten. Don't start thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm only 250 pages into a book that's 600 pages. Just focus on the topic that you're reading for the next 2 hours. Just focus on that. Focus on creating flashcards for that. Don't distract yourself with those other things. Rely on your flashcards to bring back to your mind the older topics that you studied last week or last month. That's what flashcards are for. Just go through those all the time. And create your own labs. And create labs that get more progressively difficult in layers. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you're going through the IC&D 2 material, it might start out the very beginning of the book with basic switching. So you create a lab where you just basically just log into a switch and look around, issue some commands and get familiar with the output. Then it gets a little bit more progressive with adding VLANs and VLAN trunks. Okay, let's add that. Then it gets a little bit more progressive with routing and with access lists. So what I'm saying is, if you're taking the approach of creating your own labs, not working through a lab workbook, but creating your own labs, the labs you create should become more and more and more complex. In other words, once you're 3 months into studying for your CCNA, your lab shouldn't be simply take 2 routers, connect them together, put an IP address on them, and ping. Your lab should involve like 3 switches and 4 routers. By that point in time, you should be creating a lab where you say, okay, in this lab, on my piece of paper here, I want these devices to be in this particular VLAN. I want these devices to be in this other VLAN. I want to have a trunk here with a native VLAN of 5. I want this IP addressing scheme. I want to create an access list that prevents this from going to here. You should be writing all that down on your piece of paper. When you're creating your lab, you should have multiple objectives that are testing you over things that you learned 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. So that's what you should be practicing your labs, is making your labs progressively more layered with things that not only you're studying right now, but things you studied in the past as well. Not learning IP addressing and subnetting well. So whenever people come to my CCNA boot camps, one of the things I stress to them is I say, look, you know, when you come to when you take your CCNA exam, if you see something like this, and you're asked a question, how many hosts are available in that network? How many hosts? That type of question, you should be able to answer that in less than 15 seconds. Okay? If you have to look at that, you're sitting down in front of your CCNA now. If you have to look at it, you have to say, oh, 255 is 1111111, 1111111, 1111111, and 248 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's the binary right there. Let's see here. These are my host bits, and that. You do not want to be thinking like that when you take your CCNA.